We are back here continuing our fall video series, previewing the tight ends. Very excited to talk about this group. We're going to name the best player of the group, as well as naming a breakout player and the top freshman. A little bit interesting of a group here. You lose Brevin Jordan, but Will Mallory is back, and I think there's no question he is their best player of the group. David, what do you think about Will Mallory? I assume you're naming him the best player.
Yeah, I think he's going to be the best guy this year. We finally get to see Will Mallory enter a season as the guy at tight end after having to essentially be the backup to Brevin Jordan the last few years. To me, with Will, it kind of boils down to opportunity. Um, I think he produces when he is in that lead tight end role, but injuries and having to play behind Brevin, I think has limited his chance to fully show what he can do. We've seen flashes of production in the past, and I think if Will can stay healthy this entire season, which I let's be frank, I think it's kind of a big if, judging by what we've seen here from him during his college career. But if he can stay healthy, I think he's going to be a highly productive player in this offense.
And I think it's probably what you notice as well, but Will has shown the ability to have big plays out of that spot, whether
Yeah,
it's running those seam routes and just coming up with big plays. One of the things that stands out to me with Will, and he said it in the spring, was he recognizes that he'd like to be more consistent, not just game to game, but in games. And I think that's what we've seen is just, yeah, he might have a big catch or a big play in the first quarter. And then, we just don't see much of him the rest of the game. That has happened. And he's essentially has recognized that, and he feels like that's something he's going to work on. And I don't think there's any question if he's going to be that number one, he's going to be that number one guy. But that's one of the big aspects of being the top guy at a position is you've got to be a weapon, a threat throughout the whole game. And I think that's the thing to watch for with Will is just, put, quality quarters together within a game. And I do expect Will to be a productive player. Miami wants to go to their tight ends. You saw it last year with Brevin. You've seen it in spots with Will, and I think this is going to be a year where Will not only will be that number one guy, but I think he's going to produce what you're hoping for out of that tight end spot, whether it's 30 catches or whatever it might be. I do think he's going to be productive in catching passes, in between the end zones, but I think he's going to be scoring touchdowns as well, and I think it's going to be big for the offense.
yeah, I think everyone around the program respects Will for his work ethic, and we've seen the development and progress in his game over the years. I think the first year blocking was a concern. I think he showed he improved that in year two. In year two, drops, if we're being honest, were a concern. He would drop some easy catches. I think he cleaned that up last year. So now it's just time for him to put it all together. And, I think when he has been the starter, he's shown that he can be a 50-yard guy in a game. And he's shown even like the ability to get 50 yards on two catches, which is rare at the tight end spot. So it's all there. I think he just has to put it all together and quite frankly stay healthy. And if that happens, he's going to produce.
So we've seen this tight end position produce in duos the last few years, whether it was, mentioned with Brevin and Will, but even going back with David Njoku, Chris Herndon doing it together a few years ago. I am curious who you think this breakout player will be of the group. Maybe it's Will, maybe you've got another guy in mind, but essentially, kind of where Miami has stood in recent years, they've had another guy that can be productive in opportunities. Who do you think is going to be the breakout player of this group?
I think it's tough to pinpoint one, if we're being honest. I think Will is going to get the bulk of the snaps. I think there's just too many question marks with the other guys, if we're being honest. Larry Hodges back on the team after a brief little suspension for off the field stuff. What's his standing going to be, in terms of really being able to play? We'll find out, but I think he'd be probably the guy you'd have to point to right now as starting the season as the number two guy. Dom Morelli, he's coming off some shoulder issues, which I guess, is still kind of lingering going into fall camp. So we'll see what his availability is. And I think the same can somewhat be said of Elijah Arroyo, who's coming off, I guess, some knee surgery cleanup stuff in the off season. But I think it is fair to say if Elijah is fully healthy, fully a full go, I think as the season progresses, he could be the number 2 tight end. But honestly, Chris, I just kind of view this as Will Mallory's show at tight end this year, which, as you said, it's going to be different than what we've seen at the position. But I think it's going to be Will Mallory at tight end and more receivers getting on the field. That's my read on it.
Yeah, I'd be surprised if the number two tight end, if another tight end had more than 10 catches in the season. And I know that's a low total to get. I just don't see it happening. If I had to pick a breakout guy, I'd pick Larry Hodges because I do think that the players and the coaches have spoken highly about his ability in terms of things he can do on the field. Again, like you mentioned, he's got to stay on the field. So I'd pick him. I really like what Elijah Arroyo is bringing to the table for the future. And as far as Larry being a breakout guy, look, I don't again, I expect him to be the breakout guy of the group. I don't expect him to, in terms of
Yeah.
role snaps, things like that, but I don't expect him to be ultra productive. We'll see if that can change, if he can kind of be a guy that's really reliable. But I really like what Elijah brings to the table. He's my
Yeah.
top freshman. I know there's some local people that really like what Khalil Brantley brings to the team in terms of some versatility at the spot as a freshman. But
Sure.
when you watch Elijah on film, there's a lot to really like. I like that he gets into the end zone from different points on the field. I really
Yeah.
like his ability for the future. Again, we'll see if it happens this year, but he's also a guy, if you want to guess a breakout guy, he could also be the fourth guy on the depth chart throughout the whole year behind the two guys you mentioned. Or is he a guy that emerges and can really showcase his abilities early on and be that number two? So a lot to it's a lot to watch for with Elijah in year one, but I don't think there's any question. I think he's a guy to watch for in the future because you should
Yeah.
really like his abilities.
He's probably going to be Miami's next star tight end. His high school film was one of the best of their recent class, right? Just the plays he made, you touched on it. And you've been around him too at these camps. His frame, very impressive. He's obviously added some good weight since arriving to UM. So he looks the part already as a freshman at tight end. To me, the question is just how healthy is he, which I think is an unknown right now. I think he's close. I think he's on his way back, but is he going to get a full clear all go for fall camp? We'll find out. I think if that is the case, he might emerge as the number 2 tight end. Now, does that mean he's going to play a bunch? Again, I think it's mainly going to be Will Mallory. But yeah, he is, in my mind, he's the future of the position, and maybe we'll see more of him in the second half of the season.
Or it might come in spots. I think the way I look at this position in general, I think this has to be a group that's very efficient um, with their opportunities. Look, if they're going to go with more wide receivers, if they want to run the ball a little bit more, there might not be as many opportunities for tight ends in general, whether that's Will or the other guys. But I just think, look, you touched on Will having issues and drops years ago, and I just think this group has to take advantage of any opportunity they get. I think that's where the strength of this team can be. I think Will can be a very productive player in his role, in his opportunities, even if they do good with other guys. But I think this can be still a strength of the offense when they get their opportunities. And I think that's going to be the key of the group. And I certainly think Will can be one of those top ACC tight ends. He's
Yeah.
shown it in flashes, and I expect him to be one of those guys. There's certain things that he actually does better than Brevin did. Uh, Obviously a little bit bigger guy, and I think he can maybe provide some height there and particularly in the red zone. But we talked about his ability just to get downfield, and Brevin had
Yeah.
that too. But just I think you've seen that with Will, and I think Will does a good job of holding on to the ball, making contested catches, and really shows some toughness in the middle of the field. So not that Brevin didn't, but I like what Will brings to the table. I think that can still be a strength of the team, even if they only have one guy that they're really going to quite a bit.
Yeah, at that position, you just need one, right? And if you have a matchup problem at tight end, it does stretch a defense. Let me ask you this. So last year, Brevin had 576 yards, I think, didn't play every game, but played enough. If I was going to ask you over under 500 yards for Will Mallory this year, which direction would you go on that?
See, I would go under, and only thing I would say, and
Because
they're
of
going to play
health?
more. Well, I think that they have other guys that they can go to in the offense. I think it's going to
Okay.
be inefficient. But the only thing I quickly said that, but now that I'm thinking about it, they're going to play more games ideally,
Right.
right? So maybe he gets over the 500 mark. But
If he's
again, I think,
healthy, I would say over, but that's a big variable for Will. It is.
yeah, I think he's going to be efficient. obviously the health thing, but uh, yeah, I think that they can just go to other guys is the way I look at it. But
Fair.
that doesn't mean that he won't be a good player for them. So tight end numbers are always interesting. I've kept
Yeah.
track of tight end stats since 2000. And I have it year by year. I always like looking at it because it's very interesting to see how it all breaks down. But certainly, I do think Will be a good player for them. And if Will is hurt, I think that hurts the offense quite a bit because
Yeah.
I don't think these other guys are ready for
No.
having games where they're 3, 4, 5 catch games where they can get 50 yards. I don't see that at all. So I think I think the offense will take a hit, and I think we saw that a little bit at times when Brevin was off the field. So definitely a position group to watch for because of that key with Will. He should be one of the top tight ends in the ACC. It should be fun to watch him for a full season.